He's the one prepared to come.
Don't be the last one to show up to a family function. Whether you knew him as Mr. Hannan, Si, Dad, or Pop, we're going to miss him. And we'll miss him on days like today because he'd know exactly what to do. He'd see you across the room. He knew it was going to be a tough day. So he'd ease over towards you. And he'd have that grin on his face and that little twinkle in his eye. And if he was slick enough and he made it work, he'd have a bag of potato chips or some other kind of junk food or those nasty little candy orange peanuts that he loves so much. And he'd slide over to you and he'd open his jacket just like this and he'd hand you one. If Doris had caught him, he wouldn't have that. But he'd have some hard candy in his pocket for sure. And he'd reach in and he'd hand you a piece and just grin at you. But he knew it was going to be tough, so he wouldn't stop there. He'd lean over and it'd be maybe in the middle of the service right now. And he'd say, "Did you hear the one about the rabbi, the priest?" And then with that grin getting a little bit bigger, he'd look at you and say, "And the Methodist minister." We all know he'd do that to us that knew him. But if you're one of the few people in this room that didn't know him, we all know that you would have been the first one he went to. Because you see, Hannan knew no strangers. Never met a stranger. And that's cliche, but that's the life he led. If he saw you and he didn't know you, you were in trouble because he was coming. He was going to try to make you laugh. One of the things I think I respect most about Si, or Pop, as I called him for the last 20-something years with grandkids, was the game plan he had for life. And it was a very simple game plan. And I'm not saying he was a simple man, but his game plan was very simple. The first part of the plan was to love your family with all your heart. And he did that. No doubt about it. Excuse me. If you talked to him, you knew it within a matter of minutes because you hear a story about somebody. He loved his wife, he loved his daughters, loved his grandkids, and he even loved his son-in-laws. And if you got behind him at some point, if you got behind Doris and Si out on 64 or going into Ingalls or somewhere, you saw that he was proud of everybody too. Because on the back of the women, in the back of the car, as each kid went off to college, there was a new college sticker. And with 9 grandkids, they were running out of room. As a former trooper, he should have known better, but they kept sticking those stickers in the window for every grandkid that went off to college. The second part of the game plan that I think he had was to keep things simple and don't take life too seriously. And if you knew him, you knew he lived this out. He wasn't above making fun of himself, letting himself be the butt of the joke. And he didn't take any situation too seriously, whether it was in a hospital or in a situation like this. He always found a way to bring it back to something happy. As that, he was a spontaneous man. Many a trip to what should have been Asheville or Hendersonville to Home Depot or Lowe's ended up with Pop crossing either the Georgia state line or the Tennessee state line. And what happened was he'd get in the car and he'd see a road he'd never been down, and he'd turn. And he'd see another road and he'd turn. And he never worried about it. His philosophy was, eventually I'll figure out where I am. Talk about a road less traveled. That was what he did. And on those trips, that if Graham was with him, I'm sure she'd be telling him, turn here, and he wouldn't listen. But on those trips, if they were really a good trip, he'd stumble upon some joint that either had great pizza, or great French fries, or some other kind of junk food, and it would make the trip even that much more better. It's not easy to be spontaneous living with the Hannan women. They are planners, they are schedulers, they all keep calendars, they all have lists, and then list upon list. But I can tell you, somehow he continued to be spontaneous despite that. And one of those spontaneous things he did was several years ago, after being in the hospital in Charlotte, and things were better, he decided he wanted to do something special for the family. And so he decided, he endorsed that they were going to take us all to Tybee Island for Christmas. So they rented condos, and the 19 of us ended up at Tybee Island. And I can tell you, living with one of them, I believe most of the Hannan women had been on the internet, and they found places for us to go, things for us to see, places for us to eat. And we did all that, and every one of them was great. But I think what most of us will remember are the times that all 19 of us crammed into one condo. And we'd be in there, there'd be a card game going on in one corner, and there'd be a puzzle being built in another corner, might be a Scrabble game over here. Those of us who were lazy would be sitting there watching a TV game, watching a football game on TV, and you'd look over at Si, and he'd either be in the recliner, which he claimed, or on the sofa, and he'd be soaking it all in. And it was the way it was supposed to be. No schedule, no plan, just all of us having a great time enjoying one another. The third part of his game plan, I think, that I've already mentioned, and most of you know, is Si Hannan never met a stranger. All of us in the family have experienced those questions that start off softly and then get louder and louder of, where's Pop Pop? Does anybody know where Pop Pop is? Those questions occurred at baseball games, graduations, at restaurants, in Home Depot. And what would happen is we'd be all focused on whatever the event or thing that we were at, and Pop Pop would be working the crowd. And you'd look back in the corner, you'd look down across the field, and you'd see him there. And he'd be talking to the waitresses or the waiters. He'd be talking to the busboys. He'd be talking to the guy at the concession stand, or he'd be talking to the janitor at whatever schoolhouse you were in. And if you were patient enough and gave him a minute and watched what was going on, you'd see those people break into a big smile. He'd turn away and start ambling over towards us. We found Pop Pop. A combination of the spontaneity and the never meeting a stranger occurred again at Tybee. We had gone into Savannah one night, and as we were crossing a bridge, Pop Pop looked down and he saw a gambling cruise ship. And at that moment, he decided he needed to go gambling the next night. Nobody really wanted to go, but as adults, we knew Pop Pop needed adult supervision. So Jake, who you heard from or heard about earlier, was nominated as the chosen one. And Jake and Pop Pop set off the next night to go to on the gambling cruise. And if you looked at the boat, it wasn't anything real fancy, as you can imagine. And I think they had to go out maybe 2 miles offshore before they could start gambling. And Jake told the story later that when they got on the boat, they were the minority. There was a group of Asian businessmen spoke little or no English. And there was a group of elderly African-American women from the coast of South Carolina who spoke in a very heavy gully dialect. And then you had Pop and Jake. And when they hit the 2-mile mark, within about 10 minutes, Pop had blown his $20 limit that I'm pretty sure Graham didn't oppose. And then he started working the crowd like he always did. And as we talked about his sense of humor, all of you know there wasn't a filter. He wasn't always politically correct. And I wasn't there, but I can only imagine as he walked up to the crowd with a little smile on his face and a twinkle in his eye, and he said, "Hey, did you hear the one about the Chinese guy and the old black woman?" What a legacy matters. A simple game plan for life. If we take just one page from it, we'll be better off. Love your family. And love your family in a way that shows them that all you really care about is wanting them to be happy. Don't take life situations or yourself too seriously. Be spontaneous. Don't ever meet a stranger. You see somebody who needs it, you see somebody you think needs it, walk up to them, introduce yourself, tell them a story, try to make their day better. Si Hannan lived his life that way. All of us know it. There's no doubt in the honest. And it was a life well lived. We're going to miss him. And there's going to be days when we have tears in our eyes. And I challenge all of you that when you're thinking about Si Hannan, whether you think about him as Mr. Hannan, Si, Dad, or Pop, close your eyes for just a couple minutes. And if you really think, you're going to get a little grin on your face and a little twinkle in your eye. Because you're either going to remember a story he told, something silly he did, or you're going to finally remember the punchline to that joke he told you that made you both laugh so hard. And nothing would make you happier.
At 8, opened a pharmacy, and it's tough opening a pharmacy. And if everybody remembers about 2008, that was the perfect time in the economy to open a business and cash in on your retirement to do something foolish like that. But the Lord just blessed me, and one of the blessings was after working 6 days a week for about 2 years, I met Si. And Si became one of my relief pharmacists. And I've got a lot of my team here today, and he meant a lot to us. And he always did great with our patients, and he worked hard, and he was just truly a blessing for us. And not only that, but he was a mentor to me. And sometimes it's great that you love you so much that you take you aside and kind of just say, hey, this is kind of what I did, and here's where I want you to go a little bit different from me. And I know he worked really, really hard supporting the wife and 4 girls growing up. And one time he came to me and he goes, I wasn't always there. I was always working. I wasn't always there for you, for them. And he goes, I felt like I worked too hard. He goes, Jeff, I don't want you to be like that. And he was always there for me. And even if I had an award ceremony for just 1 hour at the beginning of school for my first grader and stuff like that, he'd come in and work just an hour or 2, but he was always there. And all the people that came into my pharmacy really loved him, and he'd always tell his jokes. I'm going to share with you a joke, my favorite from Si. And there was a lady, and I kind of picture this over at downtown Hendersonville, and she's walking down she's walking down the city street and goes by a pet store, and there's a parrot in a cage outside. And the parrot looks at her and he goes, "Hey lady," he goes, "You're ugly." And she was like, "Oh my gosh." She just kept walking. The next day she's going to work and she walked by that pet store again, and that bird goes, "Hey you." He goes, "You're ugly." And she was like, "Oh, I can't believe that." She goes, "I'm going to go in and talk to the manager here." So she goes in, she talks to the manager, and the manager goes, "The bird's never done that before. I'm so sorry. I promise you the bird will never say that to you again." She goes, "Okay." Next day she's going to work, she goes by the pet store, and that bird's sitting out there looking at her. And she walks by, and the bird goes, "Hey lady!" And she looks at the bird, and the bird goes, "You know." I do miss Si, and and I know how much he loved his family. I mean, he did a big favor for me just a few weeks ago, down to the end, but he loved all that he knew. He especially loved his family, and just hearing Doris talk about his, the family and the accolades, and I mean, what a great family. Nice gene pool, by the way. Si's body gave away on him. His mind didn't, and that is truly a blessing. But his earthly body did give away, and that's okay, because God's got a heavenly body for him. And you don't know a lot about what's going on in heaven, but there's a couple things that I read recently. One was talking about the book of Job, chapter 19, and it talks about, Job was talking about that when I go to heaven, I will see God with my own eyes and my own flesh, filled with my own flesh. And when Jesus was resurrected, and he came, and Thomas, not believing, physically touched him, there was a physical body there. In heaven, we will have a physical body. And I can't wait to get to heaven, because I know that Jesus has prepared a place for me also, and give Si a big bear hug, and tell him thanks for the mentoring, thanks for everything, and tell me a good joke. Thank you.